Attempt number 2. Look at oil, 69. Holy cow. How'd that happen? Wowie. Minus, 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 minus. Look at that. Damn. That's a lot of money. It's too crazy. I can't really say. I mean, like yesterday, I was thinking we should go long, but I was like, I don't know, because it was really in free fall. Now it's like boom, all the way back as if nothing happened. It's crazy. All right, video seems to be good. Thank you, sir. See, the problem is, I don't know. I don't think you guys can see it right here where I'm making my arrow. There's a question box, right? But it's like a big block that's in my way. So I close it, and it's still a little tiny bar now that goes like this, but it's only that big, and I put it out of the way. So if I don't check it, I don't know that anything's wrong. And yesterday, I had such an amazing point to make that I don't even remember what I was talking about, but I was talking about something really spectacular. It was fantastic. And we'll see. We'll see what happens today. Today is different. Well, yesterday was interesting because we had crashed and then we were recovering. So it was really kind of a weird day. I mean, a really important point. What the important point was. I was trying to show you guys something that was really important. Anyway, all right, we'll figure it out. So, I was going to say it's not important, but of course it was important. It was an important point. All right, so now we're just going up. So that's good. This is, you know, for whatever reason, there's somebody's buying a lot. I said that this morning. What's new in Chrome? Have they changed Chrome? Oh, for God's sakes, who has patience for this crap? Just leave it alone. just leave it the way it was and stop bothering me. I'm quite the futurist, aren't I? All right, so this was yesterday's post. All right, maybe that'll remind me. No, it wasn't about, it certainly wasn't about the election. Wasn't about the troops. Probably was about CPI or something. We had the CPI numbers, and this goes back to a discussion we had today. I'm just kind of reviewing yesterday, see if something triggers a memory for me. UNH went way up. Oh, I know, that's right. I was talking about I was talking about how you got to look at the components. Oh, I remember. I was talking yesterday about this, that when you see, especially the Dow, it's such a stupid index. Dow components. It's Dow, CNBC Dow 30. I mean, there's things for the NASDAQ too. And the NASDAQ is the second stupidest index besides the Dow, because it's only got 100 stocks and there's only 7 that matter. In the Dow, it's a price-weighted index, which means it doesn't matter what the market cap of these guys is, it matters what their price is, which is completely stupid because price has nothing to do with market cap. Intel has a bigger market cap than, well, I don't know what it is right now, but they're bigger. I was going to say they're bigger market cap than IBM, but maybe that's not true right now. It's a little Yahoo or something. This thing. Okay, so INTC has a market cap of 83 billion. Yeah, I mean, they got trashed. And IBM has a market cap of 200 billion, so much bigger. All right, so IBM is twice as big as Intel. That's the takeaway here. IBM is twice as big as Intel, but because IBM's stock price is 211 and Intel's price is 19, then IBM counts 10 times more than Intel does in the Dow. Not 2 times more, 10 times more. And the whole index is like that. It has nothing to do with the actual market cap of the company. It only has to do with the stock price. And of course, IBM stock is 200, Apple stock is 200. Apple is 10 times bigger than IBM. But they're equally weighted in the Dow. So very stupid stuff everywhere in the Dow, completely ridiculous, useless index, but everywhere you go in the world, what do you see? The Dow Jones, the market everybody in the world looks at, including people in America who should know better. They always print the Dow Jones. You're always looking at the Dow number. You should only be looking, if you're going to look at one thing, it should be the S&P. Because the S&P is the 500 largest market cap companies in the world by weight. And they're and it's weighted by market cap. So the movement of the most, the percentage movement of the most important market cap company moves the S&P by the appropriate percent. That's not at all what the Dow does. The Dow just does random shit. Not only that, but they are constantly changing the Dow, putting things in and taking things out, that are taking out weak things and putting in hot things. So it's a goose index where they're always putting in the thing that they expect to do better, because it's a Wall Street Journal. They're trying to make it. The index is about getting people to read the Wall Street Journal, and people read the Wall Street Journal in hot markets. They don't read them in down markets. They don't like to read them in flat markets. When the market's up, it's exciting and everybody wants to see what's going on. So the Wall Street Journal owns the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and they decide what stocks are going to go in it, and they just constantly try to put hot stocks in it to make everybody excited, and that's what drives the market, which is ridiculous, completely ridiculous. Now, of course, in selecting the hottest stocks, they're usually picking the same kind of hot stocks that are in the S&P, but not always. Well, Salesforce got big anyway. Who's a good example? Nike. I mean, Nike is a weird thing. It's like, they're not an industrial, really. They're an assembly company. They don't really make stuff. They don't have any plants. Nike sells sneakers. They don't make sneakers. They sell sneakers. You can say it's a Nike factory, but they're really subcontracting everything overseas. There's nothing in America that makes anything. Not that the industrials mean anything anymore. But even when they added Apple, they were just going for the buzz of having Apple in the Dow Jones. But anyway, so they keep shuffling the components around. So it's a meaningless index. You look at it over time. The 30 companies that are in the Dow now are nothing like the 30 companies that were in the Dow in 20 years ago. Totally, not totally. They might say probably half different group. So how do you say that's a benchmark? It's meaningless. But more importantly, what I was saying yesterday, because UNH was down, where is UNH? UNH was down 19 points at the lows yesterday, and I said that's costing the Dow, and in fact, it's pretty much 8.5 Dow points per dollar. Doesn't matter what stock, it matters per what dollar. So if UNH is down 19 points, you multiply that by 8.5, and it costs 161 Dow points. So we had that, and then we had JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs were both down, and that was hurting too, because they were just having bad days from those disclosures. And so that's what you look at when you go to when you're told an index is way down, you see the Dow is dragging down everybody else because it's down much more than everybody else. Say, why is that? Well, first of all, the reason is because of the stupidity of the index. Second of all, a couple of companies that drop large amounts can cause incredible damage to the Dow. And if you look on the Dow chart quickly, you can see if it's a trendy thing, like if everybody's down, or if there's one particular stock causing a huge amount of damage. And if that's the case, then you say, oh, well, then this whole sell-off is bullshit. This sell-off is being triggered by a stock on the Dow that went down a lot because they fucked up individually, and everybody else is not having the same problem. And therefore, it might be a good time to invest in somebody who's being dragged down for no reason. That's a really simple trading mechanism where you can go against the herd by just simply being informed and knowing what the hell's going on. Anyway, and I think, it wasn't a comment from the post. It was a comment I made at 10:45, and I wanted to make sure so now I feel better, because I wanted to make sure you guys get that concept that you gotta understand why things are happening. If you understand if you understand how these numbers are being thrown at you and what they mean. So in other words, if the Nasdaq's going down, the first thing you do is look at the top 10 NASDAQ components and say, okay, what's going on there? Because the top 10 NASDAQ components are half of the NASDAQ. Doesn't matter what the other 90 components do. There's only 10 stocks that matter, because the NASDAQ is also market cap weighted, but the market cap, the entire NASDAQ is $30 billion or something like that, or $30 billion. And the top companies, you got Apple and Microsoft and NVIDIA are $3 trillion companies. That's 10 trillion right there in 3 companies. That's insane. So it really doesn't matter what, and we used to call the NASDAQ the Apple DAX because it was a joke, because it was basically whatever Apple did, because Apple at one point got to be 20% of the NASDAQ. Now it's down to like, I'd say 15% or something like that. NVIDIA is interestingly only 10% of the NASDAQ because they haven't reweighted it. They have to rebalance the NASDAQ to account for the fact that NVIDIA is now as big as Apple. But on the other hand, should you? Because if they're going to stay that way, that's why they don't rebalance it. Because is it going to stay that way? Why they look silly if they rebalance it and then rebalance it again. So does it deserve it or not? That's another thing I talked about yesterday. We got more into like the NVIDIA concepts and why it was a problem. But we've talked about that over time, so I don't want to get into it again because I'm out of words. But it is a big deal because that's not Fin. Oh, that is Finbit. Okay. NVDA. Okay, so. Oh, yeah, that's right. Let's talk a lot about this. All right. So, NVIDIA, keep in mind that NVIDIA didn't do anything that special. This is important because this is a $3 trillion run in the market. So 10% of the NASDAQ, since down here, 10% of the NASDAQ's entire market cap is because NVIDIA went from $10 to $140. And the thing is, should it be at $140? And what I'm saying is, and now I've said this we talked about this all year, ever since they had their rise, and I kept telling people stop buying NVIDIA, don't buy NVIDIA when it was 120 bucks, because that was 10 times where it used to be. And that 10 times at this time was something in the neighborhood of almost 100 times their earnings. It's ridiculous. You never pay 100 times earnings for a stock unless it's a dead startup that's going somewhere, where it's going to do something, but you really try to avoid that anyway. They are growing at an incredible pace. They do have sales and so on and so forth, but the reality of NVIDIA is they got lucky. They were making, oh wait, I'm going to check to make sure people can hear me and whatever. Okay. See, checking is important. So NVIDIA, coming into this time, and don't forget, they were selling their chips to AI people back here. ChatGPT, OpenAI, they released ChatGPT here, November of 2022. That's when they released the first version. Did not have a big impact, did it? Okay, when they had a big impact? When Microsoft, which is around here, early 2023, when Microsoft gave them $10 billion, that's when everybody suddenly woke up to this whole thing. But during this whole time, they were selling their chips to OpenAI. It was, OpenAI didn't magically invent ChatGPT here. They've been working on it for years. But what happened to NVIDIA is they have these gaming chips. And the thing about a gaming chip is it has to it has to be able to hold a huge amount of information. So if you think of like Fortnite, right? You play Fortnite. And, I'm sure you know these first-person shooting games. But you play Fortnite, and there's you, your character, your inventory of weapons, what all those weapons can do. Then there is the area around you that you're looking at, all the other players, and there's 100 players on each side in a Fortnite game. There's 100 players on each side, and each one of them has their own weapons, their own, all their own skill points and so on and so forth that they can do. They've got their own point of view, and every single thing you see can be affected by the game because you can shoot things and break objects and leave marks and make trails and blow smoke. So, so everything around you and everything around 200 other people has to be realized in a virtual world by the operating system of the game. That's why when you sign into Fortnite, you go into a server because there's no server in the world big enough to handle all the games going on all the time all over the world, like 1 million people playing at the same time. That would take like way too much computing power for one thing. So they put you onto different sets of servers, different cloud servers that each one is responsible for its own game of Fortnite, because that by itself is a huge amount of information. So, and it's not a server, obviously, there's many, many processors in that server. These are the kind of things that NVIDIA sells. They sell that, and they sell the gaming chips on your PC, because your own PC has to be able to carry the world in its own brain, basically, on the processing card, so that when you look left, everything shifts to that perspective. When you look right, it's that perspective. When somebody throws a grenade at you, it blows up the things in your path that are from your perspective and their perspective as well, and the perspective of casual onlookers from the sides. I mean, it's crazy. But what is that? It's like your brain. It's like you realize the world through your sensory inputs, and many things in the world can change, although you have a simpler job because you only need to worry about things from your perspective. My brain doesn't have to worry about the perspective of somebody across the hall looking at me. Doesn't matter. He's only the person across the hall from me. I don't have to worry about him. Now, if he throws a grenade at me, I will have to be concerned about what happens to the grenade, but it's still going to be from my perspective alone, not from his and not from any casual onlooker, because the only perspective I care about is my perspective of the grenade blowing up and stuff flying all over the place, including me, probably. So in other words, basically, these processes are about as complicated as your brain. Well, haha, interesting, right? So the AI guys, and I would imagine that some of the people who work today at OpenAI are gamers, were probably sitting there in their off hours going, wow, we got to find a powerful processor there to build this thing on. And then somebody playing Fortnite goes, hey, this is a powerful processor I'm working on right now. My NVIDIA hyped up, maxed out GPU on this PC in this rig I got setting up the gaming, where I've got a 360 gaming environment, whatever. That's what I think. That's what we need to build OpenAI. So then the AI guys ended up going to OpenAI. They ended up going to NVIDIA. Sorry, they go to NVIDIA and they say, hey, we want to buy your gaming chips for our AI systems. And NVIDIA's like, sure, But then what happens? NVIDIA was making gaming chips for PCs. They weren't making PC servers. But they weren't making AI chips. That wasn't in their marketing plan at all. So what happens? Immediate shortage. Because nobody ever bought the kind of quantities of their chips that these AI companies wanted. And then since NVIDIA was really the far and away leader, because as you can see here, there wasn't much money in this business. It wasn't a great business. NVIDIA had a pretty good market share, but it wasn't very profitable. Nobody gave a shit. But then all of a sudden they got orders up the ass, and what do? They do what any capitalist would do. They raise the prices. They're like, well, we can only make the same amount of chips we plan to make in 2022, and we're ramping up to 2023, but it's going to take a long time to ramp it up, and we have no competition whatsoever, so therefore shortage, and therefore more money, more profits. But they're not selling more chips. And also, we talked about this a few weeks ago, you got people like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. Those are the two guys. Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk are hoarding chips. Both of them bought 10 times more chips than anybody else in the world, than any company, anybody at all. They bought massive, massive amounts of chips for things they didn't even have yet. So they caused another shortage on top of the main shortage. They caused a shortage by ordering all the fucking chips that NVIDIA could make. So NVIDIA was in the right place at the right time with the right chip, and then there was a frenzy of demand for the stuff. So lucky And they put their money, and smartly they said, well, this is a really big thing. And they put their money into increasing output, but they didn't increase their output 10 times, they increased their price 10 times. And chip factories take 3 years roughly to build. So even competitors like Intel got caught very flat-footed, and they went the opposite way, because Intel at the same time was working on PC chips that were not smart. So Intel was going down and down. They then said they're going to retool for AI, and they started going up and up, and then they started revealing, well, they started revealing that their AI platform wasn't up to snuff so far. It was going to take longer than they thought, and it was going to cost a lot more than they thought. And that's what happened. Do they have any AI sales yet? Of course not. They only started thinking about doing AI right here. But here, this is an Elon Musk thing. They said they were going to have AI chips, and they will, but not this year and not next year, maybe 2026. But meanwhile, it's not just Intel, it's every chip company in the world is going to start competing with AI chips, and what's going to happen to NVIDIA? There's no moat. There's nothing so special about what they do. It's just that they happen to do something that got into a heavy demand that nobody else had been doing. So all the chip companies are retooling and building those kind of chips now, and soon NVIDIA, in fact, NVIDIA will be like Intel. Intel once dominated the market. And then AMD came along, and other people came along and started making chips. But Intel used to own the market, and then they didn't. So, chips are a very cyclical industry. And, first of all, the government gave Intel, and by the way, the government allocated Intel $20 billion. They didn't give it to them yet. It hasn't gone through yet. It will go through. People who don't bet on Intel are crazy. They're going to get $20 billion free dollars from the government next year. Unless Trump becomes president, in which case, who knows what's going to happen. But as it stands now, they're going to get $20 billion from the government. So how do you bet against a company that's going to get half? And that's about half of their thing. So they're going to put in 20 billion. The government's going to put in 20 billion. And at the end of next year or into 2026, they will start having all the AI chips. Plus, they're going to own the PC market because they're still, they're still in the middle of that project of putting out these super tight PC chips, like 18 angstrom kind of things, which is mind-blowingly crazy. But that's the future. Anyhow, all right, good. So there's everything I talked about yesterday. And if there's any questions, no questions, very good. And that brings us up to, oh, what is that? Weird, okay. Oh, poor DJT. That's another bad one. Where are they? Poor Donald Trump. DJT. So this is his Trump Media, Truth Social, blah, 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 blah. So this is their IPO. All right, that was a pretty good call. The IPO price was actually the right price, about 15 bucks. Flew up to 100 bucks almost. Some people paid $100 for this thing. Went right back down. Then he said he's going to run again, and he starts going up, and now it's coming down again. Now, poor Donald, unfortunately, he only later this month is going to be able to sell his shares. And boy, is that going to crash the stock when he starts cashing in, because he's got about a third of the company. But yeah, he went from having 6 billion on paper to he'll be lucky to walk away from this thing with $1.5 billion. Not that that's bad, because he didn't do shit to get to make it. But it was very, very depressing for him, I'm sure. What else to do? Oil inventories, we had a build in inventories. It was plus 2.3, plus 2.3, and plus 8. It was a build all across. So that's 4.6, 5.4 million barrel build. Not at all good. And OPEC has reduced their demand forecast for global demand. So that's a big mess. And that was only yesterday. Oh, we talked about HPE. We talked about HPE. It's not good. HPE is buying Juniper, and they're just paying too much money. They're paying too much money. They're taking on too much debt. It's not a good thing. I liked HPE before they started this nonsense, but now we did the numbers, and I'm like, nope, don't like them anymore. It's a shame. All right, so that's it for that. And as I mentioned, but we didn't get into, the CPI yesterday was no bueno. Where do I have these things? I don't know. Anyway, so the CPI was higher than expected, especially in the core. Oh, that picture was funny. See the Haitians get it. He's trying to save the cat. Oh, I love it. That's a good picture. Look how good it is, though. It's like a really good Donald Trump. So today we talked about Katy Perry, but I was really just talking before while waiting for the CPI. It's just like rambling on, like I do with the webinar. Like talking about some subject. All right, so here we were with the Dow. This was a snapshot from this morning. So right before the open, we were continuing yesterday's rally, and what we're really doing is still continuing the rally. Actually, we've improved from there. It's not, we're not up tremendously, up 0.5 point. Oil's up a lot, obviously, we said that. Oh, see? So scary to short, but really, I like the short over there. So the Dow's up 0.5 point, and then the S&P's up 0.5 point, and there's the Dow again. That's kind of pointless. The NASDAQ is up 7.7, that's good. And the Russell RTY is up 1%. Whoa, good Russell, look at that. That was a big point I made today. I was talking about, so the PPI, the core PPI and the core CPI, both up 0.3. That's 50% more than the Fed wants it to be. So clearly, they're not making enough improvement on inflation to declare victory. And that's the question of whether they're going to actually lower rates next week or not. But here's the key. The Small Business Optimism Index. Did I get a picture of that? Oh, I did get a picture of that. Okay. So the Small Business Optimism Index is crashing. Small businesses are having a terrible time. Their earnings are down. How much are their earnings down? I forgot. 7%. So earnings for small businesses are down 7%. Yet, if you go to the Russell, oh, you can't go to the Russell there. Isn't that funny? Can Yahoo see the Russell? Stock Charts doesn't have the Russell. There it is. The Russell did some weird thing where they won't release their data. Or you know, I guess they won't release it unless you pay a huge amount of money. So it depends on who pays it. No, see, it only goes back to 2020 now. Oh, no, there we go. All right, take it back. All right, so the Russell is honestly, it's on the same run it's always been on. It's a very steady sort of gain. Even if you look back this far, it's a steady sort of gain. And if you follow it along, we're right about where we should be. There's nothing weird about that. It's been flatlining, but the point is, compared to last year, what is this? This is September, right? Here you go. So last September, we were at 185 basically, so right about here. So last September, there's where we are, and now we're at 2.1, which isn't that much more. It's only not even 300 points, 250 points more. So the Russell's up 250 points, but that's more than 10%. That's almost 15%. So the Russell's up 15%, but they're earning 7% less. That's kind of nuts. There's a lot of weird, distorted things in the market. I mean, that's something's wrong when the companies themselves are earning 7% less, but the price you're paying is 15% more. And what does that mean? You're paying a much higher multiple for earnings. That's all that means. A significantly higher multiple for earnings than you were paying last year. And that was already problematic. It was problematic last year, and it's gotten much worse. So, as I said, this is a significant red flag for the broader economy. Okay, we're at levels where we were in the pandemic. So we were falling in 2019, way before COVID. We were already falling hard on small caps. We had serious problems. And this is during Trump's time, so I don't know why. It's weird that these small caps think it's so great if Trump is president. They very much favor having Republican presidents, but it doesn't make sense because it's not the same Republican Party anymore. It's this old thinking. Because there was enthusiasm. This is enthusiasm when Trump got elected, peaked out, turned out things weren't that great. Then COVID hit and things became a total disaster. Then the government gave them a ton of money, right? They paid people just to not fire you. If the government was basically saying, we'll pay for the employees, just keep paying them. Here's money, go pay your employees with it. That's what the government did during COVID. And so of course, obviously that's great. I used to pay my employees and they had to make things, and now I just pay them, and it doesn't matter whether any work they do is a bonus for me. It doesn't, because I'm not actually paying them anymore. So that was good for small business, and then the program ends, and then a new program begins, and that program winds down, right? That's what this is all about. But the reality is still a disaster. If you're a business if you're a business in downtown, and small business, think about all the businesses that hang off an office building, right? The Starbucks and the Starbucks, not small business, but you know what I mean, the local coffee shops, restaurants, strip clubs, maid services, cleaning companies, copy machine, Dunder Mifflin people, think about all the businesses hanging off these businesses that are downtown, and all of a sudden there's no businesses downtown. And they're still not back. That's that other thing that we don't talk about is this pending commercial real estate collapse, because it's half empty. There's a difference. They are 70% occupied, but if you go into the buildings that are 70% occupied and you go to the not empty offices, or totally empty offices, right? But if you go to the offices where there are people, the 70% where there are actually people, those offices are half empty. Because it's so much more remote working, and there's been so much downsizing. And those people are not coming back. And that means eventually, because you have a lease, right? You have a lease, it's a 5-year lease, a 10-year lease on a space. You have 20,000 feet. Your people, you've only got 5,000 feet worth of people. You don't need 15,000 feet. So when your lease comes up for renewal, you are going to say to your landlord, I don't need this much space. And he's not going to be able to rent it for more money because he's got competition of all that 30% completely unoccupied space that's available right now that these guys are desperate to unload. So there's going to be a lot of downward pressure on commercial real estate, a lot. And we haven't hit that yet because we're only in the very early stages coming out of COVID. But it gets worse and worse. It's just like the oil business, just like demand for oil drops a little bit every year because the whole environment has changed. Because every time someone buys an electric car or a hybrid, they're using much less oil than they used in their previous car. Same driver, not a major growing population globally. same amount of drivers, same amount of cars, cars get better mileage, therefore use less oil. That's the equation. It's an inevitable, constant drive to less and less oil until the point at which everybody has electric cars or hybrids, and then that will be your oil consumption. But that's we have 20 years of declining consumption of oil ahead of us. And obviously, there's a large contingent where the goal is to be zero. That's why the oil companies gave Trump $1 billion, because they're like, we need a candidate, and they didn't just give it to him for fun. He told them if they give him $1 billion, he will push to get people back on oil. And of course they did it, because they stand to lose tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 10 years. And they would rather burn the earth to the ground than not make the money. They don't care what the consequences are. They care whether or not they're going to make money next year. So they don't want anybody pushing for more electric vehicles and hybrid cars, and for a network of national charging stations so people can use the cars well, so on and so forth. They don't want any of that. But it's happening, and you can't stop it because it's financially sensible. And that's also where Trump's tariff mania is about. Trump's tariff mania is aimed at putting tariffs on solar panels and tariffs on electric cars that come into this country to stop the conversion. Every time an electric car is sold, it's what's the number? 50. You drive 15,000 miles a year, right? And let's say you get 20 miles a gallon. So you're using 750 here, calculator. So you have something to look at while I'm talking. So if we drive 15, if your car currently is 15,000 miles a year divided by 20 is 750 gallons, right? Now, if you trade that in for a hybrid, 15,000 miles a year divided by 30, and I'm being generous, now you're only using 500 gallons. You have cut your oil consumption and benefited the planet by 33% simply by moving to a better car, a car that gets 30 miles a gallon instead of 20 miles a gallon. That's how significant this is. Every time someone buys a new car, it's because it's mandatory. The fleet average now is 35 miles a gallon. So it's mandatory that the cars in their mix of cars are getting 35 miles a gallon. So anything you trade in, anything you've got that's older is generally going to be in the probably 25 range, for most people's older cars. And the new cars you're going to buy are going to be in the 30 to 40 range. That's just the choice you have. The cars have changed. So you're making a 33% improvement just by doing that. Now, everybody who gets an electric car goes from 750 gallons to zero. That's not good for demand for oil. And you're not getting that customer back because his next car is going to be an electric car, or at least a hybrid car. It's not like it's going to come back. It's not like increased driving is going to make it come back. And we're not having a billion, we're not having babies. This country's got a declining population. We're not a rising population. And the world's like that too. The whole world's basically flat now. So that's how drastic it is for the oil companies. Every single person who gets a new car, 1/3 of their business is gone, at least. And how long before the whole fleet rolls over? About 7 years. So every year it gets worse and worse and worse. And then the next roller after that, the mileage requirements, if you leave the Democrats in office, will be 50 miles a gallon. And you know what's funny about that? That's 10 years from now, or 10 years from now. That's what Europe is at now. It's not impossible. It's the same freaking car makers as we have now selling in Europe. Cars get 50 and 60 miles a gallon minimum. And you know why? Because their government said this is what you got to make. And they said, sure, we can make that, no problem. In America, oh my God, we can't do it. Oh, it's so difficult, blah, blah, blah. Why? It's much more profitable. You make more money selling heavy machines. All those lightweight materials cost money. All the efficient engines cost money. And that's one thing that Trump wants to stop. And when I say Trump, I mean the guys who pay him, I mean his sponsors. And the other thing he wants to do is to make sure that nobody sends those freaking $20,000 electric cars over from China. That's the last thing he wants. They have $15,000, $20,000 electric cars in China. They're normal cars. It's just the same way we used to be prejudiced about, when I was a kid, and this is, when I was buying a car in 78, basically 78 was the first year I could drive. So back in 1978, nobody wanted a Japanese car. Japanese cars were shit. People drove a Toyota, you'd laugh at them. A Honda, Toyota, something like that. You used to laugh at those people for driving those Japanese cars. They're 10 pieces of shit, blah, 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 blah. You'll die, blah, 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 all that. Meanwhile, they were cheaper and got better mileage. It's like, it didn't matter as much then, but that was the basic difference. They're cheaper and got better mileage. So people did buy them. And over the next decade, they took over. And then they started getting more stylish and more Americanized and whatever. And then that's what was destroying the American auto industry in the 80s, was they instead of looking at the competition from the other countries and saying, we better get our shit together and make our cars like them or we're not gonna have any sales, instead, they said, oh, let's berate them and make fun of them and try to get people not to like them, and we'll keep making the same 11-mile-a-gallon cars that we usually make, which is what they were back then, 11 miles a gallon. Let's see, my first car was a Barracuda. I don't honestly know. I was 15. I don't know what the mileage was, but it sure wasn't good. But it was fun. What a car! Oh, anyway, so I had a green Plymouth Barracuda. It was green. Oh my! I think like a dark green, but like that's funny to think about. Cause can you imagine if you saw somebody driving a dark green car now? Yeah, back then it was considered like a cool, sporty color. The car out, and then my sister broke it. My sister wrecked my Barracuda. She borrowed it and wrecked it. So my mom felt bad. I ended up getting my mom got a new car. I got her Chrysler Cordova. That thing was double the size of the Barracuda. It had Corinthian leather. Remember Ricardo Montalban, the spokesman, had Corinthian leather, and it had a huge moonroof, and it was like a boat. It was like a Cadillac. It was just gigantic, and it was cool. And that was white with a red top and red interior, and it was nice. The leather was fantastic. That was during the crisis of the oil crisis, so I know exactly what that got. That got 11 miles a gallon because because I knew exactly. It was costing me a fortune. I had to sit there with a freaking calculator because you could only get 8 gallons at the pump, and it's like a 16-gallon tank, and I could only buy 8 gallons at a time. And then they had the odd even thing and all this crap. It was like a nightmare. In fact, my friend's car, they had a thing. They had all kinds of rules that they kept trying to manage the gas shortages. And one of the rules was you couldn't fill up if you had more than a quarter tank. So my friend had a little button he could push on his dashboard, and the needle on his tank would go boom and fall down to an 1/8. So then we look and see, oh, an 1/8, okay, you got some gas, and they still only give you 8 gallons, but that he would rip it off and get his tank filled up that way. Wow, we had such fun. So anyway, that was a great call. Point being, what the hell was I talking about? Small business optimism. No, oil. So the point being, that was 11 miles a gallon in 1980. So now it's 40 years later, I think, 40 something, 40 something years later, and we're getting 40 miles a gallon. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even conceivable back then. But what's happening? So I'm saying, so we're getting 40 miles a gallon here, and these cars from Japan and from China, same bullshit, right? The Chinese cars, you'll die, it's not gonna work, it's there. Bullshit. There's a billion people driving Chinese cars, they're fine. So the Chinese car they want to send over here, and it's not, and by the way, if it was possible for them to say you're not up to the standards, they would say it, but they're not saying that because it's not true. They meet all the safety requirements that an American car makes. So therefore, what does Trump do? He says, I'm going to put a tariff on everything. What is everything? Everything especially includes cars. No car, he doesn't want cars, he doesn't want solar panels, because he's been paid $1 billion to not want those things. That's what that whole thing's about. That's why he's tariff. That's why he repeats tariffs over and over again. Everything's going to be solved by tariffs. My whole plan is tariffs. Everything is tariffs. Why? That's the solution to stop people from getting cars with better mileage. Because as soon as it becomes normal, and like I said, when I got my Barracuda, I would not in a billion years, no matter what you said to me, I wouldn't have taken a Japanese car. My first car was a Barracuda. My second car was the Cordoba. After the Cordoba, I got my dad's freaking company car, which was a Chrysler K car. I don't even remember what it was, but it was like a box. It was awful. It was horrible. Can you imagine going from a Cordoba, like a luxurious, gigantic floating boat, to a little boxy work car, like it was a Dodge or something like that, or whatever the hell, it was a K car, whoever made K cars, I think it's Chrysler. Hated that car. Took that car to college. That died. Then I bought a Honda. So now it's 1982. Yeah, 1982. I had to buy the Honda because my dad's car died. My dad's car was like falling apart, so I bought the Honda. Bought the Honda for $800. It was called a Honda-matic because it wasn't really automatic. You had to shift it from first gear to second gear while you were driving. You had to use two. You had to manually shift it from first to second. It wouldn't do it itself. Then I got, after that car was literally made of tin. The engine was made of tin, and what happened is, and it was already broken. The cooling system was broken, and what happened is when I was driving home from school in the summer, it's like a 3-something hour drive. I was driving home from school in the summer. The engine literally melted. Like pieces of the metal melted and fused because it had the heating system wasn't working anyway. So I had to drive in 90-degree heat. I had to have the heater on full blast to get the air out of the engine. And it was a very hot day, and I had a very long trip, and it died completely. So my parents came to rescue me. My dad had a friend who had a car dealership in Mount Kisco, New York, which was not too far from where I was. So my parents came and got me. I don't know what happened to the car. I guess my dad had it towed away. And we drove straight to his friend's dealership, and I bought a Mazda GLC that was orange, another good color that you don't see anymore. I had an orange Mazda GLC that was $3,000, and it was used. It wasn't new, but that was a $3,000 car, but it was not that used. And I had that one for the rest of college. And where did I get it? Oh, yeah, that's right. So then after college, as soon as I got my first job out of college, I got a Saab convertible. That was a good car. I like that car. Anywho, so cars, but the point was the mileage. The mileage got better and better and better and better. That's what the real point of the thing was. But we weren't that worried about mileage until, again, recently. We were super worried about mileage back then. But back then, back in the 80s, it was, well, you get 10 miles a gallon or you get 15 miles a gallon. You didn't really have a choice at 20. There wasn't like 20 mile a gallon cars running. I think a Volkswagen Beetle had the best mileage. Then we didn't really care about that sort of thing for a very long time. Or maybe I was just doing well, so I didn't care. I don't remember caring at all about mileage until the last 10 years, and it started becoming important again. So PPI came in this morning. Oh, any questions? Let's see. No questions. Great. Either great or you can't hear me. Who knows? One or the other. Where are we then? 140. When did I start this? Oh, yeah. Okay. So core PPI is up. Business optimism bad. Still got inflation. These are good notes. This is Warren wrote this. So in other words, if I realize that I'm rambling on in a report and talking about like one thing without covering everything, then I print Warren's report after my report, because he doesn't do that. He doesn't ramble off topic like I do. He sort of like focuses on what's going on today. So I think that's good to print his report too. He mentions a small business thing. See, this is his mention of it. Mine's like 5 pages. Defensive stance and risk. Okay, so stay cautious. The weak small business earnings signals a broader economic risk that could lead to a tightening labor market and reduced consumer spending. Oh yeah, because that's the main thing going on in the labor market is the biggest problem small businesses have is they can't hire people. It's getting more and more expensive to hire people because the big businesses, there's a very shallow labor pool. And I don't know what is up the ass of the media. Well, I know what's up the ass of the media because the media is owned by billionaires. Media it's bullshit now. You can't trust anything you read in the media because it's controlled by the top 0.01%. They bought all the media. There's no independent media anymore. The New York Times has got the only thing left that's a real independent major paper. I think the Washington Post is owned by Bezos. That's right. So enough. There's really not much to go to if you want an actual independent paper. You know, the Wall Street Journal is owned by Murdoch, things like that. So, you know, whether, you know, look, Bezos, I don't think is controlling the Washington Post, but the Washington Post is very unlikely to come out strongly in favor of a wealth tax on multi-billionaires. You're not going to read in the Washington Post that people who are as rich as Jeff Bezos, people $100 billion, should have no problem giving $10 billion to the government as a one-time wealth tax, because he still has $90 billion. And you can say, oh, well, that's not fair. Though, why should he have to give $10 billion as a one-time tax? Just because he has $100 billion? And the answer is, yeah, that's why. Because he has $100 billion because he's been undertaxed. Nobody should have $100 billion. It's too much money. It's more money than a human being could reasonably spend. It's more money than his family could spend. It's more money than generations of his family could spend. There is no purpose to a person having that much money. Certainly no purpose that benefits society. And the purpose of taxes is to redistribute wealth. And the problem is we have not, and I've had this conversation with you guys already, so I'm not going to bore you with it, but since the 1970s, since Nixon, we have not redistributed wealth the way that we used to, the way this country was built on. We have not redistributed wealth back to the middle class and the lower classes. We lowered the corporate tax rate, we lowered the individual tax rates, and I'm not talking about your individual tax rate, I'm talking about the tax rate of the people who earn more than $100 million a year. And it used to be that if you earned 100 million, it wasn't 100 million at the time, it was lower, but adjusted for inflation. But it used to be that if you earned $100 million a year, then the next 100 million you earned would be taxed at 70%. Not the first 100 million, the next 100 million. You would kick into a tax bracket where, as Ayn Rand would say, and as any conservative worth his salt would say, it's not worth working. And you know what's funny about that? Don't. We've had that rate for most of the history of this country. We've had those kind of rates, and you know what? No one has ever not worked. That's the whole point of Atlas Shrugged. That's what it is. It's a revolution by the billionaires to say, well, if you're not going to pay us, we're not going to work, and watch society collapse. But that's bullshit. Because people work, you know, once you have $100 million, you're not working for the money. You don't need the other yacht. You don't need the third floor of your penthouse. You know, the 2-floor penthouse is usually enough for most people. If you know, the third floor, and you know what it is. I mean, if you know people that rich, these people put cars in their freaking apartments because they just have there's so much space they don't know what to do with it. It's like, oh, let's make this a garage. Let's have this one room be just pictures, like a museum, and we'll rotate the pictures on a regular basis. So I got this giant, so I have a whole like 3 of a normal person's apartments, and all it is a bunch of pictures on the wall, a couple of statues, and in the closets it's all more pictures that we shift around every once in a while. So we have a rotating display of different works of art that are also worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It's stupid shit. Not producing anything for society. You take it away from society. This stuff should be in museums. Other people should be able to look at it. Not just you and your friends. The second boat, this, that, none of this stuff is necessary for anybody. So when you have $100 million, you're not working for these things. You're racking up money because it's a fun game. But it's not a fun game to the people you're taking the money from. Money is finite. Yes, we print more. Yes, it grows, but it's pretty finite. And you know what's funny about money? It grows by moving through society, and there's a multiplier effect. So when money goes from me, so in other words, when money goes from my boss to me, or from you guys, frankly, let's think of it realistically, right? Money goes from you guys to me. Okay, I pay my programmers, I pay the computer company, I pay electric bills and phone bills and so on and so forth. I pay my landlord, I pay this, I pay that, I pay rent, I pay food, so on and so forth, right? That's money moving through society. All those people then go out and spend their money and it moves through society, right? And they pay more salary and wages and people get employed and so on and so forth. So there's a whole ecosystem that goes on from this one payment of money. And that's great. That's how you build society. That's how we grow the economy. Movement of money throughout the economy is how you grow the economy. But when instead I'm being charged, so some of those people who I pay are Jeff Bezos, right? I pay for my Amazon website. We're on Amazon now, so I pay him for my web services, a couple of $1,000s a month. I buy things from Amazon. I'm paying Bill Gates money. I'm paying things like that. So when I give my money to Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, they're not recirculating the money. Amazon Amazon pays some salaries and so on and so forth, but the percentage of profit that goes to Jeff Bezos is dead money, because you know what? He's not spending it. Jeff Bezos makes $10 billion a year. He only spends a couple $100 million of his own personal money. The rest just accumulates in his bank and gives him a bigger and bigger and bigger score. He's already bought all the shit a human being can possibly buy. He doesn't have time in a year to visit all his houses. He can't possibly go on all his boats. So he doesn't have more stuff he needs. He might have some things he wants, but he doesn't have anything he needs. And it is really hard to spend $10 billion a year when it's coming in every day. If $10 billion a year is, I don't know, a lot of money. Let's see what that is. All right, so, it's about 500 million a week, right? 10 billion divided by 52 weeks. Yeah, 200 million a week. So he's making $200 million a week. So any day he sleeps in, that's 10 million bucks. That's going to just drop into his bank account if he doesn't spend it. Any week he doesn't spend $200 million, more money is in his bank. And that money accumulates and accumulates. And you know what else? That money demands interest. So somehow or another, that money is demanding interest that is being sucked out of the economy. And where does it go? Into his bank account, where it accumulates more interest. It's like a black hole. And that's terrible. The same way a black hole is terrible for your solar system, if it moves into it, a black hole of money, when you reach a critical mass of capital, it sucks up all the available capital around it. It demands interest. It's like gravity. It has to be fed. It has to grow. It has to be fed. And it will be grown and fed from the surrounding area. And And when you say that it's good for the economy, that is the same bullshit as if you see a black hole sucking up Jupiter and somebody says, oh, that's going to be great for the Earth economy. Look how big it's getting. No, you're next. It will eventually grow and take up the whole solar system and suck up the sun as well. It is not a good thing when a black hole moves into your local neighborhood. It is not a good thing when a billionaire appears and starts sucking up money in the local economy. There's no benefit. Look at what Walmart does. Look at Walmart. Walmart is a giant corporation. There used to be a hardware store in every corner in your town, right? All the things that Walmart does. There used to be local grocers and local this and local that, and all the little things at Walmart. There used to be toy stores. Remember toy stores? Remember like little toy stores that like used to sell toys and kids used to love going into? Remember bookshops? Bookshops were fun. There used to be a little store for every section of Walmart. There used to be a store, and that store was owned by a couple, and that couple would employ a few people, and they would make money, and that money stayed in the town, and they would shop in the town and work in the town and build a house in the town and so on and so forth. And the money would recirculate, and the town was healthy. But then a Walmart moves in, it outcompetes, and one by one, the mom and pop shops all fall apart, all stop, all close down. So all those landlords lose money, except for the one landlord that rented to Walmart. All the local landlords lose money. The downtown district falls apart. All the local people have to go work at Walmart for minimum wage because there's no more mom and pop shops to work at. And mom and pop have to go do some job somewhere because they can't run a local store anymore. And where does the Walmart money go? Your entire town now is giving their money that they earn locally to Walmart. And what does Walmart do with it? Do they reinvest it locally? No. They send their money to China to buy goods. They might employ some local employees, but any profit they make, any excess money they make, other than what it takes to run the store, Bentonville, Arkansas, goes to one family that has 700 billionaires in the one family. Or not 100 billion, probably 20, 30 billions each, whatever it is. But anyway, so it's like, multi-billionaires. That's where your money goes. It's not circulating around anymore. It's not going to get to your children. It's not going to go to your school. It's not going to go to anything useful for you. You're sending it out of the town and away, and it's never coming back. And then that money becomes one of those black holes. It reaches a critical mass, becomes a black hole, and sucks up all the profits around it. So, and by the way, that's what Donald Trump would consider Marxism, because I'm basically telling you there's a problem with capitalism, and that's what damn it, how do you say her name? Kamala. It's Kamala, like a comma. It's Kamala Harris. So that's what Kamala Harris is. Yeah, I learned how to say it, but I still can't say it. I can never get around that. That's what Kamala Harris is. Father basically was was critical of capitalism. There, I said it properly. He was critical of capitalism. Ooh, that's a hard one. And therefore a Marxist, because God forbid you criticize capitalism. But it's a serious problem. It's a massive problem. And again, what was my point? My point was saying that God forbid you say, oh, well, you know what, Jeff Bezos, when he makes $10 billion a year, the 10 billion that's over 100, it was all over 100 million, the 10 billion is over 100 million, he should be taxed 7 billion of that. And you're going to be outraged by this? Why? Let the money go to the government. Let it be spent locally. Let it be spent on infrastructure improvements. Let it be spent on feeding poor people. Let it be spent on educating the children in the world. You know, and you could say, oh well, Jeff Bezos, he gives money away, especially like Bill Gates. Bill Gates gives money away. Well, yeah, you know what? But we vote, and the country has politicians, and we elect people, and their job is to decide where the money goes, not Bill Gates. You know, Bill Gates phenomenal philanthropist, the greatest philanthropist in the history of the world. He's given away, he's still got $100 billion. He's given away $200–300 billion. He's still got $100 billion. He'd be a trillionaire if he hadn't been so charitable. If he had put that money into things and invested it instead of giving it all away, he would be a trillionaire now. And then, oh, imagine that. So if he's a trillionaire, here's the thing. So if he had kept the money and he had $1 trillion, and I don't even know how many zeros that's going to be. Is that enough? No. Million, billion, trillion, right? That would be a million. That would be a billion. That's a trillion. Okay, so if he had $1 trillion times 0.05%, let's say a 5% return on his $1 trillion. A really crappy, he's got a really bad financial advisor. That's $50 billion. It would cost $50 billion a year just for him to leave it laying around without really, trying to invest it or move it around. 50 billion, it would require, it's the black hole sucking up money. His $1 trillion sitting in one place would require $50 billion to service it. That $50 billion in some way, shape, or form would be taken away from everybody else. And we'll divide that by 165 million working Americans. $300. That's all. And that's why you don't notice it. Because when a company's got that much money or when a person's got that much money, it's only hitting you a few hundred here, a few hundred there, but that's money that would have gone to you. That's money that would have been available to working Americans, except it wasn't because Bill Gates needed it to improve his $1 trillion pile. And not only that, but because that money was not given to the government to pay off the debt or to reduce the deficits, you are also in debt the money that he did not pay in taxes. So it's double. Every year, and it's not just him, it's every 100 billionaire, every one of these guys, each one of them is taking that kind of money. And so it adds up and it becomes 3,000, 9,000, whatever the hell dollars it is being taken away from every single working person in America because the money is required elsewhere. It is not required to you. It is required to the people who have accumulated these massive pools of wealth. And it will get worse and worse and worse until there's nothing left for anybody except for the uber rich. And then they're going to have to attack each other because there'll be nobody left to take money from. Right now, they can still make you poor because it only requires 303 of your dollars to make Bill Gates another 50 billion. He just has to squeeze it out of you. And how does he do it? That's pretty funny that you ask, because didn't Jeff Bezos just raise fees on Amazon Prime by what is it? Even if it's $2, it's still $24 a year. That's going in Jeff Bezos's pocket and out of your pocket directly. Microsoft just raised the price on 365. Microsoft is charging money for Copilot. Microsoft is charging money for this. That's money out of your pocket. Do you not see it? It's going out of your pocket to people who are already phenomenally rich, and they're not paying taxes, or they're not paying enough taxes, and therefore they get richer and richer and richer. And as they get richer, they're able to monopolize, like Jeff Bezos has certainly done. Amazon controls everything. All retail is going to Amazon. They're shutting it down one by one by one. In fact, if it wasn't for Walmart, I think Amazon would have already crushed retail. So you have enough, so like I said, the billionaires will have to eat each other eventually. But that's what's going on. That's the macro picture, but it's slow. And you don't see it, and it takes decades for it to play out. So nobody complains because you were like the frog in the boiling water. You don't complain because it's happening so slowly. But it's happening. It happens every time another fee gets raised. It happens every time a multi-tens of billions of dollars wealthy corporation or wealthy individual's company or whatever decides to charge you a little bit extra so they can make a little bit more profit than they made last year. Why? Because they need it? No, they don't need it. They don't need it. They want it, and they will demand it, because if you don't give them the money there, they'll invest in something else that you'll give them the money there. Like Apple's got credit cards now, and it's nice. It's a good, convenient thing. Now my credit card is tied to my iPhone, but Apple's now taking a fee in there somewhere. Doesn't seem like a big fee, but it's a fee. A little bit of money coming out. Oh, and not that though. But did you used to have an iPhone? Don't we all pay like $100 a month for having an iPhone, basically? Where'd that money come from? Me. That's our money. The money I didn't used to have to pay to have a phone, I'm now paying to have a phone. I used to have a phone. I used to have a mobile phone. It was 20 bucks a month or something like that. Now I got a $100 a month phone. Now they can put AI in it and charge me another $20 a month. And then you take it's the same thing. You got $20 a month times 12 months times 165 million people, million working people. I'm only counting the working people. $39 billion. Poof. Isn't that easy? I used to complain about my cable bill. It was $100 a month. Now I don't even know how many services I have. I really don't. To have the same amount of channels I used to have is definitely like a lot more money than it used to be. I don't even know what they accomplished with that freaking that bundling thing they did. It just ruined everything basically. Anyway, so the Fed. So anyway, so this is all where the interest comes from, where inflation comes from, and services inflation is what's killing it. It's services that drive inflation, and that's because when there's two kinds of services. There's the services like all this bundling shit where we're just being taxed out of our brains for everything we do, and then there's the direct cost of services like me having to pay my hair cutter $50 for my for the beard and the top. I have to pay extra. But I pay $50 to get my hair cut. I used to pay $40 to have, before COVID, I paid $40 to have my hair cut. So that's 20%. When you get your car, when you get your tires changed, when you have a cashiers and so on and so forth. And there's little things like that too. It's like when you go to the supermarket and they no longer have the bagger, it takes longer for you to check out, and that's my time. That costs me money. And when I go to Starbucks and they have incompetent baristas because they aren't willing to pay the money they need to pay to get good baristas, that wastes my time too. So that's what really grinds an economy to a halt. You have an expanding economy, but you use up all the workers, and it's not just that you can't fill jobs at all, which is also a huge problem for small businesses. They just can't find people at all. But you're filling the jobs with less competent people, and those less competent people do not perform as well, and therefore, boom, the economy starts grinding to a halt. It's 1,000 paper cuts. It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's a little thing here and a little thing here, and the plumber doesn't show up, and the electrician doesn't do it correctly, and the guy who said he'd have your car back, have an oil change done for you, and your car doesn't come back in time, or it takes long at the shop. And you're waiting 4 hours at the doctor's office because he doesn't have enough staff. All these things add up and start eating into everybody's productivity, and it grinds the economy down. That's where we're at now. And so the Fed is not going to help that, and the Fed understands this. The Fed's not going to fix that by lowering rates. They're going to make it worse. There's a lot of factors to take into account. Oh. Speaking of which, Warren says, Phil's post underscores the dynamics at play: sticky inflation, struggling small businesses, and uncertainty surrounding the Fed. While the market may continue to rally, we should approach with caution, favoring defensive instruments and keeping a close eye on the labor market and inflation trends. In this environment, staying nimble and prepared for volatility is a key. And then maybe talk about anything else that was interesting, see if there's any questions. Oh, there are questions. Let's do that. All right. You guys can't see this, right? I don't think you can. Cody says, I have a question. How do you choose specific dates and prices of which options you want to buy. I understand selling puts and using bulk call spreads. However, I'm really curious as to how you decide which options you like and don't like. I like to sell as much premium as is reasonably possible, and generally, I try to sell quarterly short calls. So if we're selling short-term options against a longer position, I'll usually want to sell quarterly. It's a matter of getting the flexibility and also being able to sell more and having more than one chance to do it. You can always reposition. For longer stuff, I like to be out 1.5 to 2 years, so I pretty much as long as possible with leaps. So you know, for what was it? So for Apple, for example, all right. So they're at 222. I think they'll be at 250 down the road. So in December of 2026, because 2027s aren't out, I would establish a position, and let's say my position would be buying the 200 calls that are $20 in the money, and those things are 30. Let's say 38 bucks. So those are 38 bucks. Wait, is that the 220s? No, it's not. Sorry, 43 bucks. Let's say 43 bucks for the what the frick number is that? Oh, that's the last. What am I looking at? Something's not right. Oh, the strike's way over there. That's why. It's very confusing. All right, the 220 strike is 43. No, I didn't say 220. They're at 220. I want to buy the 200. Sorry. The 200s are 54. Thank you. The 200s are 54. And let's say I want to go with the 200 240 spread. So the 240s are 33. So obviously 54 minus 33 is 21 as far as I can remember. 21. Okay. So it's $21 on the $40 spread. I'm buying the 200 calls and I'm selling the 240 calls. But now let's get a little fancier, and let's say that I'm also going to sell the 180 puts, because I'm positive. Well, it's positive. I'm very certain that Apple's not going to go below 180, and if it does go below 180, I'm very happy to buy it. So I sell these calls for 11. Let's say it's 12, just to make it an easy number. So it's $21 to buy the spread. The 200 240 spread is $21, but I sell the 180 puts for, well, let's say 11. Here you go. I can sell the 175. I sell the 175 puts for $11. And now my net on the $40 spread, on the 200 240 spread, is now only 10 bucks. That's my net. I can make now $30. But not only can I make $30 upside on Apple, but I'm starting out $22 in the money for net 10. I do have the obligation of buying Apple for 175. So let's say sell. Let's say I sell 10 175s and I sell them for 11. That's only going to affect my buying power by $17,000. All right, so I'm reducing. I'm laying out much less. I'm only using $17,000 worth of buying power to make that spread. I'm sorry, to sell the puts, not make the spread. But I'm using $17,000 worth of margin power there. That's a good use of margins. Collecting $11,000 for $17,000 in margin power is a very good spread. I'm very comfortable with that. I don't mind owning Apple. If you do mind owning Apple, don't do it, of course. But you have to, you know, but I would love to own Apple for 175 minus 11. Be very, very happy with that. So now I've got $30 worth of upside. I also have 827 days to sell. So now I go, ooh, let's see. Now I'm going to go. And like I said, it's generally going to be 3 months out, unless I think the numbers are bad. I'm going to stick to my normal thing. So I'm going to say 3 months out from now is basically, well, it's December, but I'd rather sell the January call. So let's take a look at January. Do I think Apple is going to, now this depends on next earnings, right? Now for next earnings, do I think Apple has a good chance of really impressing people? I don't see it because they've already announced the iPhone stuff. They're going to, they won't have their Christmas sales in yet or anything. So it's going to be a little tricky, and I'm not so bullish on the market and the economy. I think we're overpriced. So I don't think they're going to be much over 220. I could sell the 220 calls for 16, but I'd rather have some buffer. So maybe we'll sell the 230 calls. I feel certainly safe about that. So now we can sell the 230 calls for 11, but I'm not going to sell them all, even though I have $30 worth of headroom, right? Because I'm going to make 30 bucks if Apple keeps going up. So I have $30 of headroom, but I'd rather sell the, instead of selling the 220 calls, I'll sell the 230 calls, and I'll sell those for like 11 when they pop up a little bit to 1085 now. But I'm only going to sell half. So I'm going to sell $5,500 worth. Now remember, my net on the original position of 10 was 10 times 10, that was $10,000 total. So I only spent 10,000 on the position plus 17,000 in margin. So I'm tying up $27,000 of cash in margin. But now I'm selling using 127 of 800 and something days. I'm selling $5,000 worth of short calls, or 5,500. So 27,000. Oh, sorry. 5,500 divided by 27,000 is 20%. So between now and January, I'm collecting 20% of what I laid out on the spread back on this play. Next year, I'm going to collect another 80% of my layout. So by the end of next year, and I'll still have a year to sell, I will have collected 100% of the money I laid out back. I now have a free play on Apple. So by the end of next year, if all goes well, I should have a free play on Apple. If it doesn't go well, I have the flexibility to sell more calls if Apple goes lower, because I only sold 5 out of 10 possible calls. Or if it goes higher, I'm going to roll them. I'll roll them along. So I might miss a sale. I'll miss a 5,500 collection, but I'm going to roll them higher to strikes. So in other words, these 230 calls, which are $11, and we're not even talking about the fact that that premium will evaporate. But if we move along to April, the question is which calls are 11? So 240 calls are 11. So I have a free $10 roll up. And if I'm forced to do that, that means my longs are in the money. Once I hit 240, my longs are 100% in the money, and I got 30 bucks coming to me on the longs. So that's my standard, and it will change if I see a better price. I always look when I'm gonna do the sale. Where were we? So in other words, when I get to January and I'm selling, like, in fact, I just did. I looked at, I said, well, the 220s, and I'm like, well, no, I'm a little more bullish than that. These are 13, but that's still a little tight. These I'm very comfortable with if it goes to because if it goes to 230, it means my longs are doing great. So I don't have a problem with this at all. So I sell these guys for $11. And I feel very comfortable with that sale. I still have $10 worth of headroom, plus I have a roll to 240. So I'm really only selling the April 240s at worst. And I feel pretty calm about that, right? Because if I sold the April 240s for $10, which I am doing, I'm selling these for $11. I roll to April. That's just like I sold the April 240s for $10. And that means my net is 250. And I really don't think Apple's going to be over 250 by April. 250 is $30 higher, 15% up from here. Although I will tell you, by the way, ooh, that's a good exercise. Look how much fun stuff we talk about. Oh dear. There we go. Oh, Sage, good. Good. All right. It depends on who I'm using. Apple announced the new, what do you call those things in your ear? Earbuds? AirPods? Damn it. The new headphones. What do hearing aids cost and how many of them are sold in the US and globally? This is crazy. This is, by the way, the most crazy thing in the world that you're even able to do this, because I mean, this would be like a whole research project. Like just a few years ago, we're doing like a pretty big, and before Google, forget it. Before Google, it'd be like, oh, I got to go to the library and there are all these book places. I got to look up 100 different things. You needed to be Goldman Sachs to even ask this question. Now watch what he's going to do. Hearing aids, wow, 906,000. No shit. Over the counters, two to 3,000. So they are expensive. So Apple's not wrong about their pricing. Most customers select medical grade hearing aids between per month. Oh my God. Apple's AirPods, that's what they're called, AirPods. Will soon function as FDA cleared hearing aids, costing $249 total. Hearing aid sales in the United States, 3.65 million hearing aids were dispensed in 2016. That's a long time ago. U.S. hearing aid market expected to grow, blah, 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 aging population, blah, blah, blah. Global sales of hearing aids, 5 million, only 5 million units, really? Okay, so not that many. 10 million, all right, so 20 million hearing aids sold worldwide. So let's say Apple gets half of that, which is 10 million hearing aids, times 249 bucks. 2.5 billion. Pretty good, huh? So that's annually, that's 20 million annually. $2.5 billion a year in hearing aid sales. Not hearing aid sales, in AirPod sales. Additional, or it's interesting because you had to say, well, okay, well, so, but then the thing is, the people who are buying the AirPods might not be Apple users, and that's going to encourage them to get an iPhone to go with their AirPods to get the full use out of them. How crazy is that? All right, so that's how easily Apple can make an extra few $1 billion. So they'll sell that many in just AirPods, just their AirPod sales, $2.5 billion a year, more than they're doing now. So $2.5 billion a year, more than they're doing now, and of the $2.5 billion a year, since an iPhone is $1,000, they don't have to sell. If they sell 10%, it's going to be another $2.5 billion. If only 10% of the people also buy iPhones, they're going to start pulling in double that. It'll be $5 billion a year. $5 billion a year times 20 is $100 billion in valuation. That's pretty nice. That little announcement that nobody really paid attention to is a huge thing. And they end up with more users and more people and more money and so on and so forth. But that, again, that's what happens. So that's that cool. You can see how these black holes of capital, right? Because what does Apple do? They have to be fed. The beast has to be fed and has to grow. And for the beast to grow, it has to suck up another business. So now what's the downshot of that? The downshot of that is all the people who make hearing aids for a living are fucked. That business is going to be gone. Just like Apple wiped out all the Walkman people and everybody else with the iPod when it came out. It's the same thing. They're going to wipe out the hearing aid industry because they've got a new product that works with, especially, I mean, anybody who's got an iPhone, it's a complete no-brainer. But even if you don't have an iPhone, it's a very advanced hearing aid. It's a much more advanced hearing aid than other people have. But then you could buy an iPod with it if you're in Africa. If you're cheap, if you want a cheap iPod, it'll work with a tiny little $50 iPod, but it'll also work with the iPhone, and it's going to encourage some huge amount of people to switch to iPhones also. So massive, massive win for Apple. And that's why, obviously, so that's not why I'm bullish on them, but Apple is also going to take over the robot market. The same thing. You see these jokes of robots that are going around? They're terrible. Apple's got infinite money. They have literally infinite money. They make $100 billion a year. Every month they make $10 billion cash. Drops to the bottom line. They're sitting on a couple of $100 billion, and they have 10 billion more coming in every month. They don't know what to do with their money. So what makes sense? Having Apple robots. But I just had this discussion. Oh, you know what? I had this discussion yesterday with you guys. No one heard it. Anyway, so the problem with robots is, like the other day in the middle of the night, like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, I went out to get some. I wanted to get water from the kitchen. And I do that, I do that all the time, but for some reason my dog decided to be on the floor in between my bedroom and the kitchen, which he never is. That's not where he usually is. So I stepped on him. Not hard, but I guess because I have, fortunately my reflexes still aren't terrible yet. So I pulled my foot back quickly, but he jumped up in the air. He was freaked out because he was sleeping. And I freaked out because I kicked him, and I was like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. And it was almost, if I fell on him, it would have been very tragic because I weigh a lot. He does not. Anyway, so again, if I were a robot doing the same function, I would have fell on him for sure. There's no robots that have that kind of reflexes. So there's that, and the same thing. It could have been a baby. And I don't think that a robot would only trip on a dog or trip on a baby under very poor conditions, like in the middle of the night when all the lights are off. I think a robot could trip on a baby anytime. I don't think they're really as graceful as people are walking around and doing stuff. Okay, so that. Then you've got, do they know not to put a toaster in the bathtub? Do they know not to? Do they know that if they spill grease on the stove, next time they turn on the stove, it can start a fire? Like the stove is off, and they're doing something, and some grease spills and lands on the stove, like some oil or whatever, and they don't clean it up for whatever reason, or they don't see it. It doesn't have a resolution that they see or something like that. Then the next time they turn on the stove, as soon as it gets hot, burst into flames, big fire, blah blah blah. How many things does a robot not know? When it's sitting there chop with a knife and cutting things up and working in the kitchen, does it know like if somebody walks in and puts their finger on the counter to like stop chopping? Especially if it's a kid who's like trying to grab the food or see what's being cooked or whatever. Does the robot know to stop chopping because kids are crazy and do stuff like that and put their hands like right where you're chopping? Grandmas know that. Mothers know that. Most people who use knives understand that concept. Do robots? Do they think like that? No, they don't. I work with them all the time. I work with AI all the time. That would be a big surprise to them, unless I thought to teach them about it. So unless the programmers think of every single possible thing that can go wrong, and you can, because infinite things can go wrong, because that's the other thing. It's hard for them to improvise. They need experience. So none of this stuff can be rushed out. It's an insurance nightmare. You can't put robots, like Elon Musk wants to just like ship 100,000 robots. People will die. And not because of a robot uprising. People will die because robots are not as smart as people. They don't have the experience. They don't see the potential accident coming. That's the key. Like the shelf not the shelf, the cabinets in your kitchen, right? You open the cabinet, perfectly normal thing. I open the cabinet, I take something out. Sometimes I leave it open or something like that, right? If I'm bending over the stove and cooking, and my wife opens to take something out of the cabinet, she knows she better close the cabinet, because if I turn around, that's right where my eye is. So there's a sharp piece of wood, like a corner piece of wood, sitting there right at my eye level, and I don't know that she opened the cabinet behind me, and all I do is get up and turn around because the phone rings or something, and there's going to be my eye. She thinks about that because she's human, and she knows that people do things. Simply not realizing that is critical. So, robots, you can sit there and demonstrate all these things that they can do, but the reality is that when push comes to shove, they're not going to be good enough to be in people's homes doing these things. Not for many, many years. So Apple will start working on robots when they're ready. In fact, Apple tried to buy Boston Dynamics, the ones, that make the robot dogs and things like that, the really cool robot dogs. Apple tried to buy them just recently. And then they said no. But that's what Apple's going to do. They're going to build or buy robots and start doing that. And in a few years, that'll be their next big product. They're going to start rolling out home robots. But, nobody's ready for it yet. It's not like they're behind. It's just ridiculous to try doing it now. Oh, all right, my voice is going. So, Jim Walton's net worth is now $99 billion, says Rick. Rob and Alice are worth 97 billion, blah, blah, blah. They're worth 300 billion as a pair. Yeah. So yeah, the Walton's got shit tons of money. Elon Musk has 300 billion by himself. It's insane. It really is insane. What isn't that money doing? That's the thing. What is that money not doing for society? It is definitely taking more money out of the pool of money that's available. Just to pay the interest on that money is taking tremendous amount of money out of circulation. But what could that money be doing if it were circulating instead of just adding figures to the Forbes list? It makes no sense. And I know it goes against your grain when you say, well, how can the government sit there and take money from someone? How can they take that kind of money from someone? Because it's the government's way of saying stop. Let somebody else make money. You could be so good at making money that you could make $100 billion a year. You could be amazing. Everything you touch turns to gold. All your projects work out. All your investments work out. You could be, and by the way, as AI gets smarter and smarter and smarter, that will be the richest people. Will have the best computers and the best things and the most data available, and they will be able to do a lot of these things. They'll have a huge advantage over everybody else. But then the point is, stop. That's what taxes are. They are a way of saying to you, stop. You don't need to work anymore. We would rather give hundreds and thousands of other people a chance to be millionaires than to have you make the next billion. 1 billion is 1,000 people becoming millionaires if you don't take the 1 billion. And you've got guys like Jeff Bezos. In fact, what's his name? Ellison from Oracle. He made $14 billion last week. This week. No, this week or last week. Anyway, on the earnings. He made $14 billion just now on earnings. One day. That would have made 14,000 people millionaires. But he got it instead. Not also, instead. 14,000 people could not become millionaires because he got it. And so taxing somebody like that, where instead of getting $14 billion in a day, he would have gotten $3 billion in a day for a 70% tax, right? He would have gotten $3 billion in a day. Well, $3 billion in a day is still a lot of money. But you know what? $11 billion would go to feed children in school. That child care bullshit that Trump is talking about. $14 billion, $11 billion would go to pay everybody's child care. $11 billion could be used to pay off people's student loans, or better than paying off student loans, building freaking colleges that don't charge so much in the first place. That's by the way, the total bullshit of the student loan program, which is really misguided funds. Okay, people already went to colleges, already spent too much money, already have crushing debts and loans. Yeah, but what's the real problem? The real problem is we don't fund the state schools properly. We don't build enough of them, and we don't have inexpensive education for people to utilize. We have a complete college shortage, and it's filled by private colleges that seek to make more money, just like the fucking chip thing with NVIDIA. There's a shortage. We need more colleges, and therefore the private colleges jack up their fees because there's more students who want to go to college than there are seats for them. And the state schools are, of course, completely full. Everybody spills out to the private colleges. What if we just built more state schools? I'm the government. I don't need the state schools to make money. I just need them to create a larger pool of competition so that the private schools are forced to reduce their fees and come down. And speaking of that, Harvard's endowment is $80 billion. Again, a pool of money that is just sucking it up from everybody else. Has nothing to do with running the school. Has nothing to do with anything else that they're doing. It doesn't build them buildings. It doesn't do anything. It's just freaking money. It's a giant hedge fund. That's insane. I mean, it really is beyond crazy. That's what the government is supposed to do. They're supposed to make the big investments that are for the future of the country. Not the bullshit that we spend it on now, not the tanks and the bombs and the guns and the wars. What's that? That's zombie, right? And your guns and your tanks and your bombs and it's cranberries. Zombie. Anyway, so yeah, crazy. But that's the purpose of taxes. It's supposed to redistribute the funds for the general good. Lack of taxes creates black holes that destroy society. Very simple. All right. Oh, speaking of old, Janet Yellen's like 78 years old. Let me be the freaking Treasury Secretary. I'll sit there and explain this to people. I will get on TV and I will have charts and graphs and things like that, and I will tell everybody how this shit works and why we have to do these things. Swamp Fox says, I feel I've learned so much from you. One thing I still struggle with understanding how to manage hedges. For example, you suggested the following. Oh, I'm sorry, it's too specific. We got to do some chat. Sorry. Yeah, because I don't even know what stock he's talking about. Then he's talking about like a multi-part hedge. I did this on Tuesday based on when we discussed it. SQQQ. Okay. I'm very happy to talk to you about this in chat, but right now I'm going to wrap this webinar up, okay? That's going to be a multi-part explanation, and my voice is starting to go. All right, anyway, guys, so is that all I want to talk about? I hope so. That was all good. All right, we accomplished a lot. Oh, we're supposed to be talking about the Fed. So anyway, the PPI, CPI, it's still way too high. It's 50% higher than the Fed's target. Yes, we're making progress, but we're making very incremental progress, which means we will not get to the Fed's target for another year the way things are going. And that's, you can't in good conscience do that. We had a great conversation with Bodie about this, and we were talking about the gamification of things. See, to me, Bodie says it's an 025. He's a very smart little AI. So Bodie says it's an 025 cut of the next meeting. I say 0, and I say 0 because I don't think the Fed's making enough progress. And all things being equal, it's very, very close. But I think the tipping point is the fact that Trump threatened Powell and told Powell, if you lower rates before the election, I will fire you. So it depends on whether Powell, who is 71, whether he wants to say F you to Trump. That's one factor. It depends on whether Powell wants his job or gives a crap at this point in his life. It depends on how likely Powell thinks Trump will win. And then there's also the factor that when you say something like that to somebody, they may just do the opposite just to spite you. Or maybe Powell believes that if he does lower the rates, it will help Kamala Harris win, and it will cause Trump to lose the election, in which case it's a double win for Powell, and he would love that and go out with a great big ego. But it all depends what he wants his legacy to be. On the other hand, you could also consider the fact that Powell sees the world, that nothing he's going to do is going to stop us from going into a global recession. He doesn't want that to be his legacy, so let Trump fire him and let that be the dominoes that fall. Because in other words, it's a good excuse for him to get out of the Fed before things hit the fan, and then he'll always be able to say, see, you fired me and everything went to hell. So it's tricky to figure out what the motivations are, and obviously it's not just him. There's other people at the Fed who make decisions. There's Williams, who's his vice and whatever. It's a question of what's really going on, who's got the power, who's whispering and who's here. and there's a lot of stuff going on. I just think on the whole, and also the auctions, and then you've got the auctions. And we say, are our bond selling? We've had weak bond sales, and if you're having weak bond sales, you can't lower rates because then you're going to have an even weaker bond sale, and things are going to start falling apart that side. So very, very exciting next week. Okay, this week maybe not so exciting. Next week, very exciting. Next week is the Fed decision on Wednesday. We shall be live. We will make sure we do not have technical difficulties, and we will be live to bring you the Fed news and Powell's press conference. And they've got the data report next week too. This is so exciting. I cannot be more excited. So thanks everybody for coming, and I'll see you again next week. All right, take care, folks.